Ayla. I'm going to take a look. As a shocked Roderick hurriedly tried to shake his daughter, Isidore quickly stopped him and carefully examined his nephew's condition. Roderick and Laura could only watch the scene anxiously. After a while, Isidore sighed and gave his diagnosis. There doesn't seem to be anything serious in his body. She seems to have a slight chill, but she's fast asleep, but conscious, so she'll probably wake up on her own as soon as she gets enough sleep. Although he was told that, fortunately, his illness was not serious, Roderick remained uneasy. With Laura at his side, he didn't dare speak, but he seemed to suspect that Suki had been playing a prank on his daughter. Well, I'll go get some cold medicine. I brought some over the counter just in case. Yes, please. Just then, Laura left the room. It wasn't really his intention to bring the medicine, but rather a deliberate plan to sneak out and contact his mother. And although Roderick was worried about his daughter, he realized that Laura's behavior was suspicious and quickly gave orders to the knight waiting outside the room. Secretly keep an eye on where that girl is and what she is doing. Yes, Your Excellency. Upon returning to his room after seeing the knight following Laura, Roderick confessed the doubts he harbored. Did Suki and Isidore do something bad? If not, why suddenly? Just the night before, his daughter was in good health. It had only been a few hours since they left the dungeon together, spending a nice time wiping the ink off their faces with a warm, wet towel. He vividly remembered Ayla laughing out loud, saying she was tickled, and couldn't believe it had happened in such a short time. Anger flared in Roderick's eyes. He looked ready to burst into the dungeon and grab Suki by the neck. Wow, that can't be. Didn't you supervise the process of removing the curse from this girl's body? There was nothing suspicious. Believe me. He couldn't have done anything out of the ordinary without my knowledge. Then it couldn't have been his doing. Didn't you take measures to prevent him from using magic again after that? Roderick, who had calmed down a bit with Isidore's words, sighed and collapsed on the nightstand. With a pained expression, he grabbed Ayla's cold hand. I think she just got a cold from being so relaxed. I can imagine how scared she must have been at such a young age. So don't worry too much. Doesn't it seem like all children grow up in pain? Isidore patted his brother-in-law on the shoulder and offered him words of comfort. As a father, he had experienced it too, so he understood his brother-in-law's feelings. How long had it been? Laura, who had left the room, returned after a long while. He brought medicine from the next room and justified himself for taking so long. Sorry, I'm late. The bottle was at the bottom of my luggage. No problem. Anyway, she's still asleep, so I think it'll be okay to give her something to eat when she wakes up and take her medicine afterward. I'll be by Ayla's side, so go get some rest. At Roderick's words, Laura turned her head for a moment. It was perfectly natural for parents to be at their sick daughter's side, and with Ayla asleep, there seemed little point in holding on. Then I'll be in my room. If you have any orders, please call me right away. As Laura said goodbye and left the room, Roderick glared at her. He knew that he couldn't have hurt his daughter, since she was still useful to them, but he couldn't help but feel dissatisfied. Long after Laura disappeared, Roderick discreetly called the gentleman he had ordered to follow her and listen to her story. What did that girl do when she left this room? Asked. She went directly to her room and searched her bag, so I thought she was looking for medicine, but she didn't just take out a bottle. He also took out something that looked like a jewel and left the building. I was so suspicious of my surroundings that I had a hard time keeping my presence hidden. For a maid, her behavior was incredibly suspicious. The gentleman began to report Laura's whereabouts in a calm voice. And after that? I followed her into the forest and, well, she was using the jewel to summon a magical messenger and send a message to someone. Then, as if nothing had happened, he returned here with the jar. I see. You have worked hard. Don't tell anyone what you saw today. Yes, Your Excellency. Although it was questionable why he would keep a girl who was clearly a spy by his side, the knight simply followed Roderick's orders silently. If his lord had decided this way, there must have been a good reason. And Roderick, satisfied with his unexpected gain, wiped the sweat that had formed on his daughter's forehead with a handkerchief. It was heartbreaking to watch her daughter, who would have laughed happily and said she was ticklish like the night before if she had been awake, moan and grimace. And a few hours later, the first thing Ayla saw when she woke up from her long sleep was her father, frowning with a worried expression. Did you sleep well, Ayla? Father. A hoarse voice came from his throat, still sore from a long sleep. Still, perhaps because he had slept so soundly, his body felt much fresher. Do you feel better? I was worried, Isidore, who was standing next to Roderick, asked in a soft voice. Ayla responded, covering herself with the blanket, feeling a little embarrassed. I'm sorry for worrying you. I'm normally healthy, so I don't get sick often. You don't have to apologize. No problem. It seems like you're just relaxed. It wouldn't hurt to take a few more days of rest. Roderick caressed Ayla's cheek, his touch was so warm that it touched her heart. Wow, how cool! Ayla exclaimed, amazed by what she saw. He had finally arrived at the heart of the Weichseffen estate. Luckily, Ayla took the cold medicine Isidore had prepared, and the next day she felt like she had been washed, regaining her energy. Isidore had secretly thrown away the medicine that Laura had brought him, saying that it made him feel sick. But Roderick insisted his daughter needed a few more days of rest, even after she woke up. This delayed his arrival for several days. It was a beautiful sight at any time, but the Weichseffen estate he found at the end of winter was truly stunning. In front of the estate, a huge river was frozen and covered in white snow, and inside the frozen harbor, sturdy steel ships were moored in a row. The city, built of gray bricks, seemed to be surrounded by steep snow-capped mountains like a fortress. It was a true natural fortress. They say that the snow accumulated on the top of the mountain does not melt even in summer. It is perennial snow. And soon, the river Albeck will begin to melt and flow. So, let's take a boat and go home. Roderick spoke with a hint of emotion. His confident voice, boasting about his hometown, gave him a childish air. And under that eternal snow, there are also buried magical relics of the ancients. That's how your parents met. Isidore, who had been listening silently from behind, intervened. Roderick's ears reddened slightly at the passionate story of their former romance. What do you mean, uncle? Oh, you don't know. Your mother was sent to these ruins as a researcher for the academy, and that was when she met your father. My mother was a researcher? Wow, I see. Ayla's eyes widened at the story, hearing it for the first time, and she focused on it. His mother, like his uncle, was a magician. It was fascinating to hear the story of how her parents met and fell in love before she was even born, but unfortunately, she couldn't tell the story any further. It was because Roderick, a little ashamed of his love life, urged them to quickly enter the castle. Upon crossing the drawbridge and entering the castle, the residents took to the streets to receive the Lord's visit. Ayla was a northerner, so she had imagined them to be reserved and gruff, but contrary to her expectations, the inhabitants of Weichseffen seemed cheerful and enthusiastic. And in that welcome, Ayla felt a sense of guilt. Originally, the Duke of Weichseffen was a position that required him to travel between the capital and the north, dealing with both the affairs of his lands and the protection of the empire's borders. However, after losing Ayla, Roderick and Ophelia remained in the capital, worried about finding their daughter. Although they had not abandoned their duties on the farm, they could not visit it as frequently as before. Roderick came only once a year to take care of the backlog and left. So in a way, Ayla could have been a loser to the people of the territory. However, among the crowd that received her, not a single face seemed to harbor resentment. Everyone seemed genuinely delighted with the return of their beloved princess. The north wind was still strong, but somehow Ayla felt her heart warm.